Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Oxford Union. Tonight, we have the extraordinary privilege of hosting someone who stands at the intersection of technology, finance, and the future itself, Ms. Sarah Friar, Chief Financial Officer of OpenAI. She has shaped the architecture of how we approach transformative technology. She read Metallurgy, Economics, and Management at Oxford, a combination that, as you see tonight, has given her a unique, practical, visionary lens on the world. From McKinsey to Goldman Sachs, Square to Nextdoor, and now as the first CFO of OpenAI, she's been at the helm of technology companies, reshaping not just markets, but society itself. So please join me in giving him a warm welcome to the Oxford Union. Ms. Friar, please welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Wow, what an incredible crowd. Thank you for all coming out. Oxford shaped who I am. It taught me how to think, what to value, how I lead today. But when I first showed up and sat on these benches, I was pretty different. I grew up in a really small village in Northern Ireland. And when I first showed up at Oxford, I remember clearly, vividly, my Oxford interview because I was wearing completely the wrong clothes. I don't know if you all had that experience. No one had given me the memo about wearing a suit. I didn't really know what a suit was, I don't think. I was wearing my church clothes, just to give you a sense. It looked kind of like the Amish, frankly. And I felt like a complete fish out of water. What I will tell you that day, when I sat in the Heartland Hall in St. Anne's College, is the one other person who was completely inappropriately dressed, who was wearing an aubergine roll neck, and he'll be so happy that I told you all that, today is still one of my best friends in life. So even in your moments, do not fear. Life has a path, and there's a reason why it's throwing that at you. So I came from a really small little village right on the border during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. My house was a house where people got lifted up every day. My dad was the local personnel manager, my mom was the local nurse, and so lifting people up was really key to how I grew up. But what Oxford brought was not even that moment of recognizing maybe I was a little different. But as I started to get a little bit more centered and realized the opportunity here, I started to feel the power of just the brilliant minds that were around me. Literally, my professor, a friend to this day, was the expert in materials. And to get to experience that is something that I now feel at OpenAI. You may not know, but OpenAI, we don't really talk about ourselves as a company. We're a research and development lab. And if you look at our path to where we are today, still very much research at our core. Researchers are not like running a business where you tell them what to do. They're like all of you. They do what they want. And it's that serendipity, that creativity that's brought us things like ChatGPT. So back in November of 2022, ChatGPT was actually rolled out as a research preview. I don't know if you guys knew that. It wasn't like a product. It was a research preview. And it just hit the zeitgeist of the world, because I think for the first time, people felt what was intelligence. What had Sam Altman been talking about? All those times you'd watch Sam present, and I would leave, and I'd be a little bit like, I think I got about 10% of that. Suddenly, you could feel it and experience it. So let's talk a bit about where we're at, given that. So November of 22, ChatGPT hits the scene. 23 is all about chatbots, about LLMs, call and response. 2024, we have a second really major breakthrough at the company to bring on an age of reasoning. So this wasn't about really large format models that were pre-trained using massive amounts of compute, massive amounts of data, the smartest researchers. This is something that happens in post-training. Once that general purpose model is done, you start a whole reinforcement learning, RL training and so on, that creates ultimately intelligence that thinks the way we do. So how I think about it is when you're trying to solve a problem, right, you might start down particularly what feels like a fertile path to get to an answer, but you might end up in a cul-de-sac. You're like, oh, that's really not going to work. Like, simple terms, think about like the person who keeps me centered in life, my EBP, James. If I called James right now and said, I need to get home right away. I need to get home to San Francisco. James might hop online and say, okay, what are the flights from London to San Francisco? Oh no, there isn't a flight until tomorrow morning. Like, he's hit a cul-de-sac. So he comes back and says, okay, but there's many ways to get to San Francisco. There's a night flight tonight out of London that can go to Chicago, and there's another one going to Denver. Let's put her on that, and she can make a connection. Oh, one of those connections is 20 minutes. She's good at running through airports, but she might not make it, even in high heels, by the way. So I'm going to put her on the Chicago one. So that's a lot of how we think, right? We head down cul-de-sacs, we hit endings, we come back, we have to try again. And that's where we got to in 2024 with our O series of models. We are the worst marketers on the planet, by the way, but don't worry. If you don't keep pace with it, half the time I'm like, what are they talking about? But that was the moment of the post-training getting to reasoning. And that's what allows agents. So as we think about 2025, we think of ourselves as being in a world of agents, agentic behavior. So now there's technology that can work on your behalf. One of the first things we rolled out was deep research. Deep research is supposed to act like an analyst. You tell it, I want to go do something. Like, go tell me, I want to buy a new car. Tell me all about cars that would work for driving in San Francisco. And so it goes away and thinks for maybe 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 14 minutes, and it comes back with an answer that I would think a human might take days, maybe even weeks in some cases, given the complexity of the problem you give it, to bring an answer. In coding, we now see examples where you can send a model off, and it might take 13, 14 hours to come up with a response. But stretch your mind to that moment where, as the model starts to get to know you, has memory, it's going to go off and do tasks on your behalf that might take weeks, months. It might come back a couple of years later. Like, if you're a portfolio manager at a fund, you might have an idea about how to play the China-US current tariff war. And turns out President Trump, President Xi got together last night. Looks like things are going to be a little easier. So nothing happens for 2 years. 2 years from now, tariff war starts again. You might want your agent to come back 2 years later and say, haha, you had an idea. I've done some more research. Here's an answer. So start thinking about us all being augmented by agents, agentic behavior. One of the things I talk about to my team is imagine what it's like as a leader when you don't just manage 7 people that are direct reports to you, but maybe it's 5 people and 10 agents. Like, how are you going to manage them and direct them? That is the world we're entering. It's an era of abundant intelligence. Okay, so what is abundant intelligence? So we think of it at OpenAI as a universal utility. It's reliable, it's accessible, it's everywhere. It's like electricity. What we see in real life is 100 million weekly active users today are using that abundant intelligence, AI, to live, to work, to learn. There are farmers in Kenya who are using it to predict the weather. Not just the weather tomorrow, but the weather for the growing season. What should they plant? How should they fertilize it? What are the prices going to be when they bring that to market? That is just real people doing real things. 2 weeks ago, I was in Austin, Texas, and a woman came up to me. She was an ophthalmologist, and she said, people come to me with eye problems, but what I've found is often the eye problem is merely a symptom of a much bigger disease. They might have diabetes that's starting to impact how they see their vision. They might have a brain tumor. And in a lot of places where I've worked, she'd actually worked in Alaska and now works in West Texas, she's like, we just do not have the capacity to bring the specialists. Think of a nurse in West Texas whose knowledge of a rare brain tumor might be 0.1%, and that's no fault of hers. She just hasn't had the access to that particular knowledge. Think of the best researcher in a place like Oxford or Stanford. She might know 30% of the knowledge of the world about that particular form of brain cancer. ChatGPT effectively has that access to all the knowledge. So it has, maybe not 100%, because there's still human innovation happening, but it knows a lot. Think about Anna. So a few weeks ago, I had a dinner for CFOs to talk finance, because we love to do that. It also usually becomes a little bit of a therapy session of what it's like to work with our founders. And after the dinner was over, don't tell Sam, After the dinner was over, I got a lovely note from one of them, and I kind of opened it up expecting it to be the thank you, it was so cool, I learned so much about how to do accounts receivable using AI. And he said, I want to tell you about Anna. And it really stuck in my mind. So Anna is his driver, and I'll put in his own brackets. This is not fancy. Just think of someone who kind of drives for Uber, but I use her frequently. Good CFO, we're always a little worried about the costs. So he said, Anna came from the Ukraine, and she came to the US, and she and her husband were getting divorced. He was able to afford some of the best lawyers. She could afford 0 lawyers. So she didn't know what to do. She turned to ChatGPT. So as she was getting all of the stuff from his lawyers, she was putting it through ChatGPT and saying, what should I do? When I have to go to court, what do I need to bring? She was afraid. She's an immigrant. She was worried about losing her 2 children. She went through that process with ChatGPT at her side, not a lawyer. I think the lawyers on the other side were a little bit freaked out, like, who the hell has she managed to get? Because, like, these answers are good. When the final docs came across from those lawyers, she put it through ChatGPT and said, should I sign? And ChatGPT said, definitely not. If you sign this document, you might lose custody of your children. And so she was able to redline that document, send it back, effectively say, assholes, I can't believe you did that, and here's what I'm really going to sign. And in her words, ChatGPT saved my life, because without my children, I could not imagine life. Like, those are the moments of what get me excited when I think about a world of abundant intelligence. Oxford is the first UK university to roll out ChatGPT broadly, ChatGPT EDU, and I'm super proud of that, because this is the future, and I want to make sure it's in the hands of everyone in this room, that access is available to all. Today we're helping digitalize some of the Bodleian transcripts, some of the dissertations from, I think, 1498. Don't totally quote me on that. And I'm kind of fascinated myself to know, what were people writing about in 1498? What can we learn from that? So the oldest university in the world is leading the future of both education and work. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that none of this is guaranteed, though. Sounds great, but it's not guaranteed. But I'm going to talk about a little my role. I'm sorry, I kind of hate talking about myself, but I was told I should talk a little bit about myself. So this is the part of the conversation that I get a little squeamish about, so work with me. So abundance, though, is not inevitable. It requires some really deliberate choices. We definitely need to make sure this is not just for the privileged few. Like, when I was growing up and my parents got sold the Encyclopedia Britannica by some really good sales guy at the door, and it came into our house, it was like nirvana, and that was just the Encyclopedia Britannica. I am that old, yes, but I just remember opening it up and almost reading it, like, from A to Z. It was that good. And that's what I think about the moment where ChatGPT comes into your home for your kids, for your whole family. But again, it's not going to just happen. It needs intention, it needs infrastructure, it needs investment. And that's where I spend a lot of my life today, is how are we going to pay for all of this compute? We need chips, we need data centers, we need research funding. This is really about investing for the future. At OpenAI, we think of it like the Apollo project. So we think it will take governments, the private sector, universities, nonprofits coming together. Again, to give a little personal story, my grandfather was English, but he came to Northern Ireland to help bring electricity. So he was literally an engineer, and he helped put up poles and run wires and, put it into people's homes. And just imagine that moment where there was a switch. I don't even know what it would have been like, because there wouldn't have been a switch in the wall, but somehow, and the lights came on. Right? That's where we are today with intelligence. The lights have come on. We've handed you a Ferrari. We're all riding it like a bike right now. Lights have come on. Imagine if we had never taken that electricity and created heating, or ways to cook, ways to vacuum up or hoover, ways to curl our hair, right? All of the things that we use electricity for today. And so we are just getting going in this world of intelligence. So a lot of my job is thinking about how are we going to fund that. And so we're having to be as creative and innovative with financing as we are with the technology, right? As a CFO, the best way to fund your business is beautiful free cash flow. Have a business model. Starts with revenue, rolls down the profit and loss account, rolls out the bottom as free cash flow. Makes CFOs very happy. However, when you're still in build mode, and I'm really proud of the fact that 95% of our users today do not pay at all for ChatGPT, for that abundant intelligence, you have to do other things to fund ahead of time. So we spend a lot of time equity raising. We are just closing right now a $41 billion equity round. And we're starting to think about interesting things we can do with debt and with our ecosystem. We did some warrants with AMD a few weeks ago, which I'm particularly proud of. If there is an Oscars for deals, I actually want to win the Oscar for that, or I want my team to win the Oscar for that. Can't wait to see that. So the promise of abundant intelligence, it's going to expand opportunity, it's going to accelerate science, it's going to improve healthcare, education, so many things. So what does it mean for all of you sitting in this room? It means lots of things. It means abundant innovation. If you have an idea, you can build it. I talked to you a little bit about where we are in agentic behavior. We think we're moving into a world of agentic innovation where agents can find novel concepts, but they're going to do that because you are prompting them. We also think we're moving into a world where maybe you can have whole companies created out of agents. Certainly in the startup world of Silicon Valley, we're seeing people now get going with maybe 4, 5, 6 people in a company, not 30, 40, 50. That has really big ramifications for the amount of funding required, but then for the broad-based impact. I see an entrepreneur in the audience nodding hard at me because I know he's using our technology for his marketing company, correct? It can mean abundant learning, right? It's going to mean you can really fast-pace the speed of your own curiosity. AI can be an incredible study partner, used wisely and appropriately, says the mom of an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. It can be abundant creativity, right? It has an amazing ability to shift away a lot of the mundane, right? There's a lot in my world of finance. It's pretty damn mundane. You don't want to do it. You want to be there for the insights, not for the tucking things into an Excel spreadsheet. But think about it even in arts, music, and so on. I'm sorry, but you all don't have access to Sora 2, but it is beautiful seeing what a natural language prompt into a video model can do at the moment. Although you've probably all figured out a way to VPN in, and don't tell me. So what I want you to do, I want you to ask great questions. I want you to build with others. I want you to use AI with creativity and care. What's important about an Oxford education? It teaches you values, teaches you critical thinking. I think universities are more important than ever in the age of AI because we need ethicists, educators, entrepreneurs in the room. My son often asks me about, Mom, what should I be doing as I think about jobs and so on? And I'm like, the number one thing you should be doing is learning this tool. But don't make this tool the only thing, right? If someone shows up into my finance world and says, I don't use Excel. I'm really good at mental math. I'm like, that sounds awesome, but please go do mental math at somebody else's company because we use Excel here to do finance. I need insights. So I think AI is going to be the same. It's going to be deeply embedded. AI I don't think takes your job, but someone using AI absolutely could. And I think that's true as we think about lifelong learning. So the super skills for the intelligence age are going to be adaptability, curiosity, but most of all, compassion. Okay, so let me bring it home. Back to everyone here in the room. As I said when I walked in here, what did Oxford teach me? It taught me how to think. It taught me what I value. It taught me how I lead. It gave me the confidence to ask hard questions. It taught me actually the humility to realize I didn't have the answer to all those hard questions, and I needed to learn from others. From that very small village that I grew up in, it also taught me a lot about lifting up others. It wasn't the most welcoming place, at least not in the beginning for me. That was probably more in my head, frankly, but it's how I perceived it. And so I really taught me to look for my community as well, and then to help others that maybe hadn't found theirs. So don't just ask what AI can do, and I know you're all about to probably ask me questions like that, but what do you want it to do? I am so excited to see what you're all going to do to shape the future. Right? The jobs of today are not going to exist. They're going to be different. Just like when I sat in your seat. Yeah, even a job like a doctor hasn't gone away, but it is dramatically different. So I will end by saying, I cannot wait to see what you are all going to do. And I'm going to be so disappointed if you don't do enough with it. We are in an age of abundant intelligence, so please make the most of it. And thank you for welcoming me here tonight.